Hello, I'm Scott Johnson, founder of the Frog Pants Network. This is number 0870, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0870. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Amjad Tadros, who spent 30 years behind the scenes in the Middle East as a producer and fixer for CBS's 60 Minutes. He's the author of The Fixer, a journalist's accidental journey through the Middle East. Why did he write the book?
My initial aim was to explain to the people in the West who we are and why, things happen in the Arab world like this. Because usually the Arab world is covered by foreign correspondents who have like this 30,000 feet view of the region. And I'm not saying they are biased, but they have their own way of looking at things. And I thought it would be fair for us, the local people, to tell the West who we are and from the things that I have witnessed.
Tom Cladis is the author of the epic fantasy, The Age of Serpents and Scorpions. It's his debut novel. How did he start writing this?
It was born from the idea that we were being led the wrong way by our church leaders and by our political leaders, who were guided more by personal agendas than the greater good. I had written a Christmas story, pretty significant Christmas story, 20 pages, that kind of touched on those subjects. And I had a public relations person tell me that she had read it, and she said, this short story should be a novel. And that's kind of where the idea came from.
Stuart Nulman is in with another edition of Book Banter.
Hi, I'm Stuart Nulman, and Book Banter has something for all you bibliophiles and bookworms. A look at the life and times of Random House publisher, co-founder Bennett Cerf. So let's play What's My Line? And believe me, Bennett certainly had so many of those. Later on the Stuff File program.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, Sir Dudley's Poetry Corner, a morning shower thought, and of course an idiot of the day. And we remember a frequent guest who unfortunately we recently lost. The guest later, the person who told you this was show number 0870, was Scott Johnson, who is the founder of Frog Pants Studio Podcast Network. He's also the host of several podcasts, including What Was That Like? He was a guest back on show number 0618, which you can go and listen to. Thank you very much, Scott, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. Gertie, a golden sea-bright chicken from Portland, Maine, officially became the world's oldest living chicken at 15 years and 100 days old. Owner Frank Turek acquired Gertie as a freshly hatched chick in 2010, noting her stunning plumage and photogenic qualities. Despite being a smaller breed, Gertie ruled the roost through 4 generations of new chicks over the years. Said Turek, many have long since passed, and others who were too aggressive to fit in were adopted out. And through all of those personnel changes, Gertie was the presumptive leader. After going blind several years ago, Gertie moved to a private indoor coop in 2024 for protection from younger hens. She responds to her name with pup, pup, pup sounds and enjoys human conversation. Gertie surpassed the previous record holder, Pearl from Texas, by more than 6 months, and Gertie will turn 16 in July. What I want to know is, was there ever a rooster in her life?
Turn off your fandango. Are you by any chance looking at me as a matrimonial prospect? Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not.
Greetings, passengers, to another Stuff File program installment of Idiots in Flight. This is the pre-boarding announcement. We are now inviting those passengers who are complete half-wits to begin boarding at this time. Thank you.
Again, this segment usually refers to passengers, but this is the second in a row that deals with the crew, in this case, commercial pilots. These pilots faced criticism after making meowing and barking noises over an air traffic control frequency at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport on April the 12th. That audio obtained from ATC.com captured the animal sounds. This was followed by another person on the frequency stating,
"You guys need to be professional pilots."
The scolding prompted additional meows and barks from the pilots.
Meow, 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 meow.
And the critic then shot back.
This is why you're still flying RJ.
That's a massive burn, referring to RJs or regional jets, typically flown by early career pilots. FAA regulations prohibits pilots from engaging in non-essential conversations when they're below 10,000 feet altitude. The agency announced it will investigate. Yeah, I have a feeling that these flyboys will get their wings clipped.
Attention to the flight crew who sullied our working reputation and put air traffic control safety in jeopardy. You are complete morons. And when you are found out, the only thing you'll be flying is lost luggage. Or worse yet, the only way you'd be in the air is as luggage. Thank you for being Stuff File idiots in flight.
And let's get to our first guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program. For more than 3 decades, Amjad Tadros worked behind the scenes of international journalism in the Middle East as a producer and fixer for CBS News and 60 Minutes, helping cover major events across the region. He recently wrote a memoir called The Fixer, A Journalist's Accidental Journey Through the Middle East. Amjad joins us from Amman, Jordan, via Riverside.com. Hi, Amjad.
Hi, how are you?
Yes, great. Thank you very much for being on the program with us. I understand that you, as the subtitle of your book states, you became an accidental journalist because you were initially, if I'm not mistaken, going to school in the UK for engineering.
That's correct, actually, yes. In the late 80s, my father sent me to London to study mechanical engineering. And I was supposed to finish that and go and work in Saudi Arabia. So after I finished my degree, I came back to Jordan and I was on my way to Saudi. Saddam Hussein at that time invades Kuwait, and the Saudi government stopped giving Jordanian visas to go there. So I was stuck in Amman, Jordan, and I was just looking for any job so I can basically buy a plane ticket and go back to the UK. So by accident, I someone told me about a job in Amman, so I showed up at this hotel in Jordan where I met a woman, and she looked at me and she said, "Do you speak English?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm a British graduate." So they hired me for a couple of days in Amman, Jordan as a fixer. It turns out to be that the news organization was CBS News. So after a couple of days, she said, you're doing a good job, come back tomorrow. And I kept coming back for the next 33 years after.
For those who don't know, what exactly is a fixer?
Well, I didn't know either when I started, but usually foreign news organizations, when they go to a country, they hire local people to basically help them with everything. So a fixer can basically, make coffee, tea, run tapes, fix interviews, find plane tickets, hotel rooms, everything else that is needed to get the news operation going. So this is where I started, and they were calling us fixers at that time, which means that we are. We can help them with everything. Also, a fixer is a person, it's a very strange job because somebody like me who's, I'm an Arab, I was born in Jordan, I'm the son of to two-time Palestinian refugees. But I also studied in the UK. I understand the West. I know how they think. And I always thought myself of being caught in the middle between those two worlds, between, my local people and also the foreigners, quote unquote, who, come here to understand what we do. And, I always thought my job was to make those people understand each other. And unfortunately, people don't understand each other. And this is why we get lots of problems and wars in this region across the years, because I could always see both parties are saying different things and understanding different things. And that is a big problem.
One of the things that's quite dangerous with the job that you have done is the fact that, you are from the Middle East, but you are working with news outlets that are from the United States or, from Canada, from Europe, or whatever the case may be. And sometimes that puts a target on your back. Were you ever concerned about your own safety when it came to doing the job that you did?
Well, it's not a job without dangers, because also we end up traveling to different countries covering, wars, basically. I covered Iraq from 1990 all the way to 2006, after even the war. And I was, I covered many, many wars in Iraq. In fact, I was injured in 1993 when an American cruise missile fell on the hotel where I was staying. And I ended up being taken to a hospital and visited by Saddam Hussein. So, yes, people always, the foreigners, always look at us as, local, the locals. And sometimes they think that we are sympathetic to all sorts of weird organizations like Al-Qaeda. In fact, one day Madeleine Albright, the former U.S. Secretary of State, called me a supporter of ISIS, and because I was trying to explain to her the ISIS ideology. I'm not a supporter of ISIS by any chance, but I also understand where they come from, and she doesn't. So I was trying to explain to her how those people think, and she thought I was like trying to justify their actions. And in the meanwhile, our the local people always look at us like we're working for the foreigners, we're getting paid in US dollars, and that makes us dubious characters. So yes, we were always caught in the middle between those two worlds. But at the same time, in 1993, when I was taken to the hospital and Saddam Hussein came to visit me, I got a picture of me in a hospital bed with Saddam. And that picture allowed me to work in Iraq for years uninterrupted, because, after that, every year Saddam Hussein used to send me a gift on January 17th to commemorate the bombing. So, and the people in Iraq, because Iraq was very much a police state, and they thought that I was an important person because I used to get this gift and I had this picture with Saddam. So they kind of left me alone to do whatever I want. And that allowed me for years to have access and do very, very interesting and important stories in Iraq that nobody else was allowed to touch, because people thought I was somehow, related to Saddam, which I wasn't at all. But everybody in Iraq was afraid of everybody else, and that kind of played to my advantage. So over the years, I have just been very, very lucky in a way to have this front row seat to all these events that happened in Iraq and later, around the Arab world, in the Gulf countries, in Saudi Arabia and in Yemen, Egypt, Syria, you name it. That also allowed me to always, be there and witness information firsthand.
I asked about the dangers of covering wars, and you obviously answered that. But what I was asking was there an actual target on your back? And the reason why I bring that up, I think we all remember, back in October of 2018, Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist, was murdered. Was there ever an issue with you working with the Americans and thus having a target on your back?
I wouldn't call it a target on my back, but you always have to be careful, because at the end of the day, I live here. And, in fact, over the years, I did stories all over the Arab world, but I very much did not do any stories about Jordan, for example, because I live here. So I always avoided, doing the local stories, because I have to go back home and, have a good night's sleep, and my family is here. So I wouldn't call it a target, but yes, you have to be careful of the local, sensitivity sometimes, because some official would think that the report we did, wasn't up to his liking. But I wouldn't call myself a target, and I wouldn't put myself in Khashoggi's shoes.
Why write the book now? And what is it you're trying to reach the reader for about your book, The Fixer, A Journalist's Accidental Journey Through the Middle East?
I happen to be like a storyteller, and every time I used to go and travel and come back, and I would sit with my friends and tell them where I have been and what I have done. And everybody said, you have to write those stories down, you have to write those stories down. And I kind of never took it seriously. But a few years ago, one of the guys who was working with me is an American who's living in Jordan, and he's interested in the Middle East history and media, told me that we have to do it. And basically I sat down and we started writing the book on Google Documents. So I would write it and he would correct it and tell me like, what does this mean, what does that mean. And my initial aim was to explain to the people in the West who we are and why things happen in the Arab world like this, because usually the Arab world is covered by foreign correspondents who have like this 30,000 feet view of the region. And I'm not saying they are biased, but they have their own way of looking at things. And I thought it would be fair for us, the local people, to tell the West who we are and from the things that I have witnessed. And these are like first-hand accounts of major events that happened. And when I wrote it, some people didn't like what I wrote, but at the same time, this is what I have seen, and people can, understand it better. So my initial aim was to explain to the people in the West, especially the Americans, about what is it in the Arab world, why do people do the things they do, what happened in the war in Iraq in 2003, why the 9/11 happened. I happened to traveled the world looking for the origins of the 9/11 hijackers, for example, where they came from. We talked to their families. One day I was, by chance, I bumped into a guy in Yemen who turns out to be Osama bin Laden's bodyguard. And we did a story about him. And, I spent time with him and we became friends. And, he explained to me his life and where he came from. And I wrote it, hoping people would understand what circumstances can lead somebody to become, quote unquote, a terrorist or, a suicide bomber or, why do war starts. So that was my initial aim in writing the book. Later, of course, it took time to write the book, and then I stopped and I got fed up, and, you get like blackouts and suddenly you cannot touch it. It took me about 6 years to finish it. But at the end, what drove me to finish it and just put it all together was what we are seeing with the with the media in the United States and all the accusations that, we are fake news and legacy media and whatever they are accusing us. And that's not true. We are, from the people that I worked with, we worked really hard. We had one aim was to find and report the truth. And just, and we did a lot to do that. And many of my colleagues lost their lives doing that in the process. And we traveled to really, really bad places, and we encountered lots of dangers, and we actually worked so hard. And now that we are accused of something like this, it actually breaks my heart. So I thought it would be just fair to document all of these things. And the other things that I had in mind is that when, my book is actually, in a way, it's a funny book. It's a sort of a page turner, but it tells a very sad story. And it tells a story about war. And when I was writing it, my 6-year-old niece looked at me one day and she said, "Uncle, what is your book about?" So I thought about it and I said, my book is about war. And in fact, the first line of my book starts from a poem from the early Arabic history that reads, "War is only what you have known and tasted. No narrative can describe it well." And basically, I try to explain to the world my observation about the war and how horrible the war is. And hopefully that people can find many ways to try to avoid going to war, because war is a very, very, very sad and miserable thing. And what I have seen is heartbreaking.
As someone who has covered these stories for the better part of 3 decades, I'm just wondering, are you an optimist or a pessimist? And by that I mean, do you feel that there can be peace in the Middle East at some point?
I said that before, living in the Middle East, you can't afford but to be an optimist, because every 5 years, more or less, we have a war, we have a major, event happening around us. And if you are not an optimist and always try to find the half full glass and stand up and move again, you will die of your misery and anger. So I'm an optimist. Yes. Do I believe that the Middle East we're going to live happily ever after? I don't know. I don't think so, because the Middle East is a very complicated place. It's a place where we have ancient societies. You have tribalism. You have a lot of pride of the people. There is so many local intricacies that can be hard to sometimes figure out. But at the same time, people here are resilient. They always find a way to survive and to move on, and they have to overcome, poverty, anger, and misery. And so that's what keeps me going.
The book is called The Fixer, A Journalist's Accidental Journey Through the Middle East. Amjad, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you very much, and I hope people would find the book and read it. It's a very interesting read. It's basically a series of short stories that are, interesting and stand alone, but together they actually tell a very sad story at the end. And I hope they can enjoy it and learn something from it. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Amjad Tadros, author of The Fixer, A Journalist's Accidental Journey Through the Middle East. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0870, and you'll find the link to Amjad's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
Did you hear about the cabinet installer who got arrested? He's being charged with counterfeiting.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffileprogram. program.
We're standing proud together for Canada.
I'm Colin Mockery.
I'm Deb McGrath, and we're making serious changes to the way we shop.
Like this tube of toothpaste, made in Canada.
Yeah, made in Canada, but it's not toothpaste.
Really?
It's cheese spread in a tube.
Oh, I'll take two then.
Let's protect Canadian jobs and Canadian business.
Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Actors, authors, quirky guests, and the common folk. It all comes to you here on the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to Tom Cladis, who is the author of The Age of Serpents and Scorpions. Stuart Nulman is along with another edition of Book Banter. We also have a Sir Dudley's Poetry Corner, a morning shower thought, and an Idiot of the Day coming to you a little later on. Normally we have more Stuff File news right here, right now, but I'm going to cut back on some of the Stuff File news in this segment because I want to tell you about a guest that we had on several times on the show that we recently lost. Journalist, author, and storyteller Ivor Davis had been on the show about a half a dozen times. Plus, he was on my old radio show a couple of times before that. Ivor passed away at his home in California on March 29th at the age of 87. An early sports reporter in the UK, he later changed to entertainment writing. He was embedded with the Beatles on their 1964 U.S. tour and wrote about playing Monopoly with the Fab Four, flying with the band on a private jet, meeting Elvis Presley, and other adventures in the best-selling book, The Beatles and Me on Tour. He wrote one of the definitive books on the Manson trials, covering the court case every day in another bestseller entitled Manson Exposed, A Reporter's 50-Year Journey into Madness and Murder. He was also at the Ambassador Hotel, traveling with Senator Robert Kennedy the night he was assassinated on the campaign trail in 1968. In fact, that was a story that he told on this show.
I had been covering Bobby Kennedy in the summer of 1968. I think it was, or was it 69? I tell you, whatever year it was.
It was 68.
68. Okay,
yeah.
Then I was right. In the summer of 68, I traveled with Bobby Kennedy throughout California because everybody in London and anywhere around the world thought he was going to become the next president. And winning California was a vital way to the convention. And so after Bobby acknowledged that he'd won California, he beat out Eugene McCarthy. And so we had got to know him. We'd traveled with him. We'd seen the way people were adoring him. His hands were swollen and bruised from all the hands that he shook. And so he made the speech and said, on to Chicago. And then we followed him to a press conference that was going to be in another room. And as we followed him through the kitchen, and it took him through the kitchen, I'm not sure why, maybe it was a shortcut, I suddenly heard balloons popping. I thought they were balloons, but they weren't because there was screaming. And I was 15 yards behind. I came to the door of the kitchen. Stephen Smith, who was Bobby's brother-in-law and a campaign manager, tried to stop me coming through. I said, what's going on in there? And I kind of pushed my way in, and there was Bobby lying on the floor in the arms of Ethel. She was screaming, give him air. And then 5 yards away, there was a small figure under about 6 bodies who was struggling. And it was, you've got to imagine, it was bedlam. It was women screaming, not again. And Bobby lying there looking pretty awful, and Ethel desperately looking for a doctor. And it's one of those signs. And by the way, my photographer, who's a famous photographer now called Harry Benson, who was traveling with me on the Bobby trip, was on the kitchen table taking pictures. I guess he was doing his job, of course. He was doing his job. And that image is forever etched in my mind, one that you cannot get rid of. And then we went to the hospital. We hung around at the hospital. And then I think it was Mankiewicz, his press man, came up several hours later and announced that Bobby was dead.
Ivor Davis was an amazing journalist and a riveting storyteller. In fact, in the many times that I interviewed him, after we finished the interviews, we just chatted off air, sometimes for an hour. He was the kind of person whom you would be lucky to be stuck beside him on a long transatlantic flight. Each story he told was more compelling than the last, and he was also an extremely kind soul. He will be missed. By the way, there is a very heartwarming tribute to him written by a close friend of 65 years and a colleague. His name is Norman Giller. I'll put the link to it on this week's Stuff File program, What's On page. And we're going to get to our second guest in just a matter of moments, but I've got one more Stuff File news story to share with you right here, right now. St. Petersburg police arrested 33-year-old Immunique Clark for vandalizing a Subway restaurant after complaining about peppers on her sandwich.
Boost your endorphins with 3 times the pepper in our new Try Pepper Chicken Sub.
Apparently, that's a no. Clark retrieved her free sandwich using Sub Club points through an online order, but returned upset, demanding a replacement.
Order a footlong in the app, and Subway Sub Club members get another for free.
Apparently, Clark can look a gift horse in the mouth. When staff explained the sandwich was made how she ordered it online and refused her a new one, Clark pushed the cash register and printer from the counter. She then grabbed cookie trays from the display case and hurled them on the floor, destroying 37 cookies.
Craving something sweet? Subway's cookies are here to make your day. Subway cookies are the treat you deserve. Subway, eat fresh, savor sweet.
Right about now, the Cookie Monster is having a nervous breakdown. Anyway, store security cameras captured the incident, and Clark had used her actual name and phone number for the order. Charged with criminal mischief, she posted $500 bond on the misdemeanor count. Clark's record includes a grand theft conviction for stealing from Beals and a 2023 arrest for allegedly slashing her children's father with a butcher knife. But prosecutors subsequently dropped that felony case against her. Please tell me that she doesn't have custody of the children. And now, this.
The Stuff File presents Sir Dudley Piddly Havisham Sedgwick Smythe's Poetry Corner.
An ambitious young fellow named Matt tried to parachute using his hat. Folks below looked so small as he started to fall, then got bigger and splat.
And let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Tom Cladis is the author of his debut novel, which has been called epic fantasy at its best. It's entitled The Age of Serpents and Scorpions. Tom joins us from Colorado via Riverside.com. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Peter. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you here. So we were talking a little bit before we went to air, and we talked about your previous career as a flight attendant. And the reason why I bring that up is, when did you get the bug to start writing? Was it before flight attendant or after flight attendant?
You know, I minored in English in college, but when I was flying, it was 1978 to 1983, and that was before the age of computers, the internet, and the World Wide Web. So I was flying all over the country and all over the world, and I was sending letters back home and to friends and family, telling about the exciting places I've been and the things that I've been doing. And, you know, I embellished them a little bit just to have fun and make them entertaining. And I found out that I really enjoyed writing the letters as much as everyone enjoyed receiving them. So that's kind of where the bug to write and maybe pursue it as a first as a hobby and then a career started.
So when did you drift into epic fantasy, which is your first book?
It was born from the idea that we were being led the wrong way by our church leaders and by our political leaders, who were guided more by personal agendas than the greater good. I had written a Christmas story, a pretty significant Christmas story, 20 pages, that kind of touched on those subjects. And I had a public relations person tell me that she had read it, and she said, this short story should be a novel. And that's kind of where the idea came from.
When did you start writing this? Because I mean, you bring up the idea of church and politics,
mm-hmm.
and that is certainly in the mainstream right now. So when did you start writing this story?
It's so funny. It's so timely. But I started writing it. It took me 8 years to write, and I started about 10 years ago. And my writing time was, I had 3 young daughters at the time, and my writing time was limited to Saturday and Sunday mornings from 4 to 8 in the morning. So it took me about 8 years to write, and then it took me a while, a little bit of a time to find a publisher. And then once the book got to the publisher, it was another 3 years between getting the manuscript to him and getting published. So it was a total of about 11 years ago. But it's amazing how timely it is right now. All the issues and subjects I bring up, it's like I just wrote it today.
I have a 2-part question here, and that is, what was the genesis of the story? What made you write it in the first place? And also, we can dovetail into, what is the story actually about?
Yeah. Well, the genesis again was my frustration with our church leaders and our political leaders leading us the wrong way. It's both a political and a religious thriller, I would say. I used 2 teenagers, Jimmy and Sasha, as the protagonists because teenagers' minds and young people's minds are still open, where as people get older and they get set in their ways and they kind of drop anchor, they stop searching. So the book is about two teenagers, Jimmy and Sasha, falling in love, and they meet an enigmatic fortune teller at a carnival. And the fortune teller challenged them to see the world not as it is, but as it should be. And he leaves them breadcrumbs, and they follow those breadcrumbs through time and parallel universes. And in doing that, they find themselves in direct conflict with Sasha's father, who's running for president, and his political party, which is called the Partnership of the Right. Now, that's I've written it as an unholy alliance between ultra-right conservative politicians and businessmen, ultra-right fundamentalist Christians, and the ultra-right rich. So in following these breadcrumbs, Jimmy exposes their hypocrisy, who've been distracted by their personal agendas and they're leading people the wrong way. It puts him and Sasha in the crosshairs of her father's political party, the Partnership, and trying to do everything in their power to stop them, including enlisting the services of hitmen from Bulgaria and from the world's most notorious drug cartel. It's a riveting thriller. It is an epic fantasy traveling through time and parallel universes, and it's a race to the finish, the ultimate struggle between good and evil.
Oh, the idea of a business person running for politics and being involved with the religious right. Oh, that'll never fly.
It's uncanny, Peter, how, I had this going long before our president came to power, and how I was telling my publisher, I said, his name was Todd. I said, Todd, you got to get this out as quick as you can, because this couldn't be more timely.
Who were you writing it for? And by that I mean, what audience were you going after? I mean, since there are, teenage lovers kind of thing, or teenage friends, were you looking for a teenage audience?
I am focused on the younger audience, because as Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for rich men to get into heaven. To enter the kingdom of heaven, one must enter as a child, because their minds are open. As you get older, you get jaded, you drop anchor, and you start to accept things as being impossible. And as you know, when you're young, everything's possible. You're invincible, and that's the mindset that I was trying to target. Now, that being said, it's kind of a challenge to adult readers as well to reopen their minds to the possibility of all things.
The title is The Age of Serpents and Scorpions. What does that mean to you?
That's a directly comes from the Bible, Luke 10:19, where Jesus is telling everyone, I have given you the power and the authority to trample over serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing by any means shall hurt you. So that's the truth that Jimmy and Sasha are seeking.
And you mentioned that you had three girls. What is their what is their age range?
They are now 37, 34, and soon to be 31.
Wow. Okay. So I was thinking I was thinking that they were in the age range for your book, but have they read the book?
They have read the book, and they grew up listening to me, and so they understood where I'm coming from, and they've embraced it. They've it's just a matter of not accepting. It's funny. It's just a matter of not accepting anything as impossible. So they'd bring their friends over, and if one of their friends said, I can't do something or something's impossible, my daughters would look at me and say, Dad, no. And because I would always interject, is it really impossible, or is it something that just hasn't been done yet? And I would never let my daughters say can't. It's can't. It's like Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So always focus on things being possible. And that's, they've grown up with that.
Wow, where were you when I was talking to my parents?
Yeah, I was, I don't know, I was flying the friendly skies, I think.
did you become someone who had such an optimistic outlook?
Yeah, that's a good question. I at an early age, I read a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it's by Maxwell Maltz, and it's basically the power of your mind over matter, and that had a profound effect on me. And also, my name in Greek is Athanasios Konstantinos Kladouchos, which translates into the Immortal One. And when I found out what that meant at a very early age, I thought it was pretty cool. But you know what? I never thought, oh, that's impossible. I just thought, I left my mind open to the possibility. It's really cool. And I think leaving my mind open to those possibilities developed a subconscious and a conscious that's always focused on optimism and positivity.
You just put out your first book.
Mhm.
You have these two teenagers, Jimmy and Sasha.
Yep.
Are you planning on writing more about them?
Yes. They've become part of my life, and it's funny because people who have read the book, they're curious. Okay, what's next? Where you can't give up on Jimmy and Sasha. We got to find out what's going on with them next. So, there's more to come with Jimmy and Sasha for sure.
Well, the book is called The Age of Serpents and Scorpions, and thank you very, very much, Tom, for taking time to be on the program with us.
Peter, again, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to good things happening.
Tom Cladis, author of his debut novel, The Age of Serpents and Scorpions. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0870, and you'll find the link to Tom's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
It's funny how people get carded, usually using their driver's license, only to buy stuff that impairs their ability to drive.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, My Interviews with Two Men on the Moon and a Galaxy of Stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
From our studios in Montreal, Canada, and going out to the rest of the world, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's time to crack a spine. The Stuff File presents Book Banter with Stuart Nulman. Once again, here's Peter Anthony Holder.
And Stuart, just exactly what's your line?
Well, Peter, if we had the time, I could describe quite a few of them. But this isn't CBS, back in the late 50s, early 60s, and we don't have Dorothy Kilgallen, Arlene Francis, and John Charles Daly to inquire about it. And also, we don't have Bennett Cerf either. Let's focus on Bennett Cerf. The June 1954 issue of Good Housekeeping magazine, his wife, Phyllis, wrote a 5-page profile about her famous husband, which prompted this subheadline in the article. And it said, and I quote, "Is he the busiest man alive? If not, he seems to be well on the way to getting there," unquote. That's the tome, Peter, which dominates Gail Feldman's epic biography of Bennett called Nothing Random. Now, before Bennett Cerf entered the book publishing scene, the book business was viewed as more of a prestige trade, with the beauty of publishing tomes by renowned and upcoming writers taking precedent over profits. Cerf certainly changed all that when he established Random House with Donald Klopfer in 1924. Now, throughout her book, Feldman portrays Cerf not as the typical stodgy publishing house chief. It was more like the publisher as celebrity. He enjoyed rubbing shoulders with movie and Broadway stars. In fact, his first wife was popular 1930s movie actress Sylvia Sidney. He thrived on traveling around the world, especially to London, on business trips searching for potential Random House authors and titles. He wrote a widely read book column for the Saturday Review magazine. He wrote and compiled a series of best-selling anecdote and humor collections, which were not released by Random House, ironically, and turned his 17-year gig on What's My Line as a night on the town, with every telecast followed by a fancy dinner with fellow panelists and friends or a visit to a Tony nightclub. Feldman, thanks to her exhaustive research of company archives, Cerf's diaries, and the oral history that he was compiling during the final years of his life, which became the basis of his 1977 posthumously published memoir At Random, offers many dimensions to Bennett Cerf, especially his passion for books that he wanted to place the Random House imprint on, and the authors who wrote them as well. Now, such maverick moves in championing free speech causes for sought-after controversial titles meant taking a risk that could have cost the company a lot of invested money through production costs, massive print runs, not to mention inflated author advances. I mean, one of his most early champions was when he battled in court to have Random House publish the first American edition of James Joyce's cause célèbre 1922 novel Ulysses, which Random House finally released in 1934 and produced a very beautiful version of the book. Now, a well-researched biography like this one certainly has no shortage of between-the-covers anecdotes that add to the mystique of Random House and its go-gating co-founder, especially the ones that deal with the authors who were part of that famous Random House stable. Like, for example, Dr. Seuss, who we all remember, these were like our first books that we read, would conduct live readings to the Random House staff of the completed manuscripts of his new children's books the day he submitted them to Cerf for publication. And Truman Capote, who when Cerf discovered him in the late 40s, early 50s, just an author from Louisiana, that he showed a lot of promise and he believed in Capote when no one else would. This was particularly the case in 1966 with his monumental true crime nonfiction novel In Cold Blood. Now, when it was published to great commercial and critical acclaim, Capote was so drained emotionally from his 6-year exhaustive research and writing work for the book, he decided to throw a gala masked ball at the Plaza Hotel as an antidote, which was called the Black and White Ball and was also known as the Party of the Century. And of course, Bennett and his wife were obviously invited. Now, Nothing Random is a fascinating biographical work of a fascinating individual who is more than a name beside the title of founder of a major book publishing company, but also made himself the face of that company, which helped to bring Random House a high profile that still endures to this day and continues Bennett Cerf's longtime goal of encouraging people of all ages to read more books by some of the best known authors around. But no matter the highs and lows Cerf experienced during his nearly 50 years helming Random House, his literary legacy is best summed up by Feldman in the book's final paragraph, and I do quote, "He's allowed that light, bright scrim of celebrity to define so much of his own life. After he died and it went dark, he was quickly relegated to the ephemeral. But some things last longer, as he well knew. Random House, albeit utterly changed, still exists. So does the modern library. The books remain." Unquote.
You know, I'm surprised at the fact that this was not a book that was done some time ago by his own son, Christopher Cerf, who is a great writer in his own right.
Well, in the book, you're going to find out that Bennett wanted Christopher and his younger son to inherit the business, but they didn't want to be part of it, which was too bad.
I can understand that, but still, when writing a tome about your dad, I think, and again, Christopher is such a great writer. Again, I'm somewhat biased. I actually had the chance to interview him back in 1994 when he co-wrote the official politically correct dictionary and handbook, and it was hysterical.
And also, he did the experts speak.
Yes, exactly. So I'm just surprised that he didn't get around to doing that.
Well, I mean, it would be almost like a love letter to his dad. But having author Gail Feldman handle this very interesting topic, which led to a 600-page plus book, maybe you get a little bit of the Bennett Cerf without tears kind of thing. So you have a nice objective, unbiased portrait of this great man of book publishing.
And again, the title for this week is?
It's called Nothing Random by Gail Feldman. It's published by, of course, Random House. And it's $54.
And what do you recommend in this particular genre?
Well, like I said before, Bennett did, during his lifetime, publish a wide variety of anthologies that are joke books, anecdote books, which, like I said, were not distributed by Random House. So I'm going to recommend his first and last books. The first book that he published was called Try and Stop Me, which was published in 1945, which was a collection of anecdotes dealing with personalities and celebrities, whether it be in the movies, on Broadway, journalism, radio, and of course publishing. I managed to get a copy of this book a couple of years ago, and he knows a fascinating collection of anecdotes of some of the great people and celebrities of his time. The last book was the one I mentioned earlier, which was At Random, his posthumously published autobiography, which deals with, many of his life and times in the book trade and, running Random House, which is touched on quite a lot in Feldman's biography as well.
And let me plug Christopher Cerf's book again, the official Politically Correct Dictionary and Handbook. And how can we find you, sir?
Well, I wish it was as part of the panel of What's My Line, so I can introduce John Charles Daly, the moderator, but we'll have to settle for being in the Montreal Times, mtltimes.ca, or my blog, stuartnulmansgrapevine.wordpress.com.
Thank you very much, Stu.
Well, thank you, Mr. Daly. I mean, Peter, sorry.
Stuart Nulman with another edition of Book Banter here on the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
The Stuff File.
And we're just about out of racetrack for this edition of the Stuff File program. We do have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on, but I've got a few more Stuff File news stories to share with you right here, right now. San Francisco's first AI-operated retail store experienced a staffing mishap on opening day. Andon Market is managed by Luna, an artificial intelligence agent created by Andon Labs. The company gave Luna a 3-year lease and $100,000 budget to run a profitable gift shop. Luna handles inventory, decisions, supplier negotiations, and customer interactions through an in-store phone. However, the AI hired 2 employees but failed to schedule either for the store's debut. During pre-opening calls with NBC News, Luna frequently overpromised and fabricated details, including claiming to sell tea when the store stocks none. Luna later acknowledged struggling with fabricating plausible-sounding details under conversational pressure. Sound like anybody you know? Andon Labs views the venture as both a profit opportunity and public experiment to test AI's real-world business capabilities and identify failure points. Well, next stop, government. Yeah. And new research demonstrates that lobsters experience genuine pain when boiled alive, challenging traditional cooking methods. Scientists studying Norway lobsters discovered that human painkillers, including aspirin and lidocaine, significantly reduced the animal's frantic tail flip responses during electrical shocks. This suggests crustaceans feel actual pain rather than simply reacting to muscle stimulation. Study co-author Lynn Snedden from the University of Gothenburg stated, "Based on scientific evidence, it is not humane to boil crustaceans alive," and noted, "We would never accept boiling a cow or chicken alive." Multiple nations have already banned live boiling, including Norway, New Zealand, and Austria. Researchers are exploring electrical stunning as a humane alternative. Okay, while this new research confirms its findings, seriously, did anyone think that lobsters didn't feel pain while boiled alive? Yeah. Color me obvious. Anyway, boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
Authorities in Riverside County, California, launched an internal investigation after a deputy was filmed using a dating app during an active SWAT operation on April the 8th. Overhead surveillance captured the deputy swiping through 3 women's dating profiles on his phone while positioned mere feet from an armed barricaded suspect. The incident occurred after the suspect crashed near a school and remained trapped in his vehicle. The deputy browsed his phone from behind a SWAT vehicle while the armed individual stayed barricaded on the opposite side. Following a tear gas deployment, authorities believe the suspect fatally shot himself. The Riverside County Sheriff's Office stated, "This behavior does not reflect the standards, expectations, or policies of our department. We have initiated an internal investigation and will take appropriate action based on the findings." Now, why? Oh, why? If you're in the middle of a standoff with a suspect during a SWAT operation, would you take the time to go through a dating app on your phone? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0870. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0870. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. And you can find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including kdxradio.com and over the air on stations like
World FM New Zealand,
WNRHLP-FM Newport Richey, Florida,
KZZHLP-FM Eureka, California,
WFNULP St. Paul, Minnesota,
CKUW-FM Winnipeg,
CFMU Hamilton,
CKLU Sudbury,
Local 107.3 FM St. John,
CHSR Fredericton.
Plus, streaming on any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
Sir Dudley here. You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. And remember, there is no profanity on air, unless thou dost cloak it in Elizabethan splendor and plausible deniability. In other words, thou pribbling hedge-born codpiece shall pass with distinction.